Hello, my name's Imagine, the host of Master of Your Crafts podcast, learning from leaders who are continuously inspired, passionate, and driven to align with their soul purpose, sharing their gifts to bring healing to others. The music is composed by Rebecca Everett.
Today is episode number 79, and I'll be talking to Goodwin, who helps people open up to their authentic selves using meditation. She also hosts the Meditation Conversation podcast. Meditation has been an important tool to help her not only reduce stress and improve her physical health, but also gain better understanding of the true nature of reality. She's passionate about helping others tap into their full potential with meditation. Hello and welcome to Kara. How are you, Kara?
I'm great. Thank you for having me. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really well for a hot summer day.
Yes.
It's good. Life is good.
Good.
Good space. So I'm curious to learn more about not only the path and the journey that you have gone through to get to where you are today, but some of the pivotal pieces that nudged you into the place to meditation, to consciousness, and having a greater understanding of this beautiful complexity of the mind, the body, and the spirit.
Yeah, well, thank you for that invitation to share. I would say I've been a seeker for a long time. For a lot of my life, I've been very curious as far as, consciousness and but I also lived a very, regular kind of mainstream, let's say, life. Where I got into the corporate world in IT and very grounded, job with blue chip companies, and got married and had kids. And so very happy, but stressed and challenged. And while I was always curious about something bigger happening, it was kind of like, this is how we live. I'm just going to live like the tried and true way that, all of the people around me are living, and trust in that. And what ultimately ended up happening was I had a series of events all within a few months, within one calendar year, but starting in May and finishing at Thanksgiving time, US Thanksgiving. So November. So within about, what would that be? About 6 months. I had a series of very serious, began with the untimely death of my sister-in-law, who I was very close with. And then 3 weeks later, our dog died. And a few weeks after that, my stepdad had to have a really serious surgery on his brainstem. And then my mother-in-law got hit by a motorbike while she was crossing the street. So she was in the hospital for a long time recovering, with like the neck brace on and all of that. And then by Thanksgiving time, my stepmom was in the ICU. She'd had a heart condition for a long time, but things really came to a head. She was managing it really well until things just went downhill very fast, and she was in the ICU, and she ended up getting a heart transplant the day after Thanksgiving of that year. And so it was one of those things where after a while, like, you start to be afraid to even answer the phone, because it's like there's tragic news always on the other end. And it was a heavy, heavy load to bear. Incidentally, at the time, my family and I were living in Italy. My in-laws are in the London area and my family's in the US. So with every tragedy that's happening, we aren't even with them. It's a drop everything, leave, and then do what you can to support, and then go back to life and be confused about how everybody is and what's going to happen next. And so up until that point, again, I'd always been curious, but I didn't really feel the necessity of diving deeply. I didn't prioritize it, and I didn't really feel that I was any good, for example, at meditation. Had tried meditation, but I didn't really feel anything happen. I didn't think I was doing it right, quote unquote, right. People would talk about these amazing results, and I was like, I just sit there and think, even though I know I'm not supposed to think. So it would be something that I'd try, and then I'd stop because I didn't feel like I was getting anywhere with it. But I was always drawn to mystical things and mysterious things. But when my life just sort of really quickly, brick by brick, started crumbling, I really felt like something needed to shift within me. And so I remember walking down the street, taking my kids to school. And as I was walking back, just having this inner dialogue with, if there's somebody out there, if I have a guide, or if God is real, I really want to get more in touch with you. I want to know you. I want to open myself up. And I had always felt that meditation was this powerful thing. And so I kind of was like, if you can send me how do I meditate? Help me figure that out. And it was really interesting after I sort of threw that spaghetti against the wall, because I didn't really even know if I trusted that anything was going to receive that. There were a series of synchronicities that started to lead me where I wanted to go. And it was started for me with learning or being introduced to the work of Paramhansa Yogananda, who's the author of Autobiography of a Yogi, and diving into that. And he had a very scientific approach to meditation. It was kind of like, X plus Y equals Z, where, if you do this and you do this with the breath, and you sit like this, then, you're going to get into a meditative state. And that means this, and I really appreciated that, because coming from an IT background, I have a very logical, rational mind, and it really appealed to me, the functional way that it was laid out, and the sort of, again, he called it like a scientific approach. And so really that was the opening for me. That was just learning meditation, and really still kind of holding spirituality kind of at arm's distance. As I was learning his techniques. He died in 1952, so it's really his legacy rather than working with him. But the organization I was working with to learn his methods, they were very spiritual. They were very much like he's the guru, and we are devoted to God and all of this. And I was still like, I really want to learn meditation, but I'm not sure about all that, And so it's been this unfoldment over time where, it starts as a very kind of grounded, practical tool to get through trauma. And it just kind of more and more opened up, parts of me opened up more and more to the mystery. And then I started having different experiences that were unexplainable, that I was like, trusting more and more. And then ultimately, it had made such a profound impact on my life that then I became certified to guide other people in learning meditation. I've learned healing modalities, and to do energetic healing. And just kind of wanted to share it more and more, and help other people to tap into that, and to really overcome that story that we tell ourselves about not being good at it. that, it's a skill to learn. So it's a thing that we practice, and there are ways to make it easier to get into that meditative state. So
yes, absolutely. But what a journey.
yeah.
What a journey for you to welcome such a profound experience and have all those synchronistic events happen, for that huge aha of something's got to give.
Yeah. Big wake up calls for sure.
Yeah.
And I didn't get to plan it, how it would happen. I wish that it could, if the purpose, from Kara's perspective, all of that led to a huge awakening. I would have loved to get there in a smoother way that didn't leave, a trail of a tragedy. But, everybody had their own purpose for going through everything that we all went through together. We're all in relationship with each other, and we're all impacting each other. And so we all get what we get from the hardships that come.
Absolutely. But what we know for sure is, would we have welcomed it if we would have had to plan it and stage it?
Well, it's a great thought experiment, because, for me, there was so much pain that was happening to other people. I was experiencing so much pain, watching so many others that I loved going through that pain. So from like little Kara, the ego me, I definitely would not have chosen it that way or designed it that way. But if we rise up and we understand that there's so much that we don't understand, there's so much that sometimes these lessons are as powerful as they are because they're so hard. And that's the wake up call that's needed. That's the alarm bell that's needed.
Sometimes we just need to have that shaken up and out of us. And there's an analogy that I often use is sometimes when we don't listen to the little nudges, we get a 2x4 slap side of the head for us to really pay attention and listen. And sometimes we, just kind of need that 2x4 to make us stop.
Right. Yeah.
Because the world is built on so much happening and busyness.
Yeah.
But it's the stillness where the magic is, and we know that.
Right. Absolutely. And there's a comfort level too. I feel like there's that edge where you get out, you're comfortable, and then you have to start getting, to the edge of your comfort to grow. And I know for me personally, I was not pushing myself to that edge. I was living in Italy. I was no longer working at that point. And so I was living the good Mediterranean life, having cappuccino with my friends after I dropped the kids off at school. And so I was really kind of coasting, and I know that looking back, and I enjoyed that very much, but there was really no reason for me to pursue anything else until I really needed it. That was how I operated. So it was kind of like, okay, here, you're a little too comfortable. Let's just give you a little shove toward the edge there, and
that's right.
See how you do.
Yeah, shake things up, and there's your soul crying out, trying to get your attention, because there's more that you can do even as you sit by the cafe side and sip your cappuccinos. There's more that you can do, right?
Right. And it's really interesting looking back too, because all of that kicked off, all of those events kicked off at the beginning of May of that year. And that, like springtime, before any of that happened, I was starting to have this weird movement in my peripheral vision, where I was seeing like these black and white checkerboard, circular rotating patterns. And I could never look directly at it. And I thought it was an ocular migraine for a long time because I used to get those. But ocular migraines would last a few hours, and I never had one that had lasted beyond a night of sleep. There was no pain associated with it, no headache, and it went on for weeks.
Right.
A good 5 weeks, if not more. I can't remember now, but to the extent that I went to the hospital because a friend of mine's husband was an optometrist, and he worked in the hospital, and they looked, and they ended up landing on, it's got to be your macula. There was like this little, they did some imaging, and there was this little thing that they saw on my macula, and they're like, that's got to be it. This comes about because of this virus. They swore that I had a virus and that I would have been sick. I would have been throwing up and all of these symptoms. I would have gotten it from my kids probably. And I'm like, no, that never happened. And they're like, it did, but you just don't remember. I'm like,
Okay.
pretty sure I would have remembered that, but
Wow.
okay. And it was also based on this really tiny study. Like they gave me the paperwork on it. It was based on like 8 people or something like that.
My goodness.
But
Wow.
it was like what they had, they were like, this is what this is. This has to be what it is. And all I was glad to know was that there was no tumor or anything like that, because I had no idea. I'm like, why am I seeing this? Well, now, and it didn't even dawn on me until maybe a year ago, that I think that was part of the awakening too. And it was related probably to my pineal gland, but I knew nothing about any of that. Like I didn't know what a pineal gland was. And I just thought physical, it's something to do with my eyes or my brain. Right. So it's interesting to like look back and be like, oh my God, that was happening. Like when my husband had to go to England because my sister-in-law had passed away, I stayed behind because I had this appointment at the hospital the next day. And I was just like, oh my God, are we going to be dealing, like had this unexpected death of my sister-in-law. And it was like, are we now going to be also dealing with like, I have a brain tumor or something,
Wow.
not have, again, like only thinking 3D, I only had that frame of reference, but it's interesting to look back and be like, yeah, what was all being set up all along the way that then when you look back, you start to see like this cohesive puzzle coming together. So it's very mysterious, very interesting.
But such a beautiful gift, because then we can literally and figuratively open our vantage point. We can expand and go, okay, there really is more to life than this. Right. Yes, I am blessed that I, don't need to do the 9-to-5 thing, time for money situation, but there's more for my purpose. There's more for what I'm here to do. There's a reason why I'm incarnated here. So my question is, having been through all of that, the heavies of that really jam-packed 6 months, to now being in a space of, it was consciousness, it was awareness, it's an element of spirituality and all that. What do you believe about yourself now? And do you feel it defines who you are?
Yeah, well, I do see all of us as expressions of God, of a higher consciousness, that we have this surface level, if we want to play here with just through the 5 senses and just, believing what's on the surface, that's available to us.
Yeah.
But we are all streams of consciousness, and we are all eternal, and these physical bodies and experiences, this is an expression of a stream of consciousness. That is, it's my belief, and it's also been an experiential, over time, having deeper and deeper experiences where, I've started to experience myself beyond the body, and just seeing geometries, being in a place of light and geometry where there isn't form, there aren't like beings there. That type of thing. has opened up because I believe I believe that belief is sort of that what we think or what we feel like is the truth. And then we start to move into, once we start to go into experience, then that is beyond belief. It's like, well, you can, it's kind of like near-death experiences. When people have near-death experiences, it's like you can tell them until you're blue in the face that, they're going to go to hell and, they're going to be in a fiery damnation because of actions that they had in this life. But they have had experience where they've been met with beings of light, and they may have been brought up in a very Catholic, for example, upbringing where they don't use that language, being of light, but then they come back and they're like, this was a being of light, that's what we call it, and you can tell me whatever you want to believe, but I know what I experienced.
Yes.
And so that's where we do start to move into, beyond that belief. But for me, that has been what has presented itself. And so I still have so many missing pieces that I don't have conscious access to, that I'm like, there's still so much mystery. Yeah. But I know also what I have been blessed to have experienced, that is like, wow, it's a vast, vast universe. And this physical experience that we're having, it's real in its way, and it's purposeful. But it's not, it's just the surface. It's just, we can go deeper. We can definitely go deeper.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so interesting because even though there's no attachment to that depth of consciousness, there is an element of attachment because it's so expansive. Because we're the little drop of the ocean analogy, there's still an attachment to being part of the ocean. We're still part of that sacred geometry. We're still part of that visual you saw in your peripheral. There's a direct connection here.
Right. Yeah, we are a part of it, and I also see it as it is the thing, it is consciousness, it is God, it's one thing. And then we have these expressions that are individuated expressions, so that God or source or whatever at consciousness can experience itself. So if you go back to the ocean, you could be everything. You could be the ocean, you could be the sand, you could be all of it, the rocks that the waves are crashing against, you can be the people on the beach, you can be it all.
Yeah.
But if you truly want to, you can perceive it, you can put yourself where you're just witnessing. I'm just observing everything. But if I actually want to experience it, then I have to take form. And so this, I think, is a key to what is happening, is that, all of these beings, all of these forms are different ways to experience ourselves as form. But so that it kind of reminds me of I remember whenever there was a Friends, where they came back together, and they had that reunion, and it got me kind of nostalgic about Friends. And it was like, oh my gosh, could you imagine? Because they had all these clips from it, and I hadn't seen Friends in years, but I used to love it. Right. And I was like, God, could you imagine being in the cast, or being the camera person or whatever, but being in the magic, because we just watched the magic. Right. And then you kind of can pull that thread, and it's it changes it, because once you're in it, you don't get to experience it as an observer, so it's like we got to watch Friends and just see it happening and experience our own, that against the backdrop of our own lives.
Yeah.
But if you're in it, that's beautiful too, because you're in the magic, but you never get to sit out and just enjoy what's going to happen with Ross and Rachel, like, because you're having to embody Ross and Rachel. And so you can't like step out of it. So it's this like observer and experiencer, and both are beautiful and amazing. And they serve their purpose, without us loving that show, there's no show, so they very much needed us to be invested as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's so pivotal that we recognize both aspects of it, because whether you're a meditator or not, or whether you understand spirituality or just think it's all woo-woo, it doesn't matter.
Absolutely.
Because whatever vantage point you're coming from is perfect.
Absolutely. I love that. And I think that, if you do get immersed in the spiritual world, there's, I see like on different Facebook groups and stuff where you would think that people are unified because they're kind of they are exploring the mystery, and they're interested in the Schumann resonance or whatever, they're wanting to talk about expansion and things like that. But if you look in the comments, there's so many like little fights all the time in these like spiritual groups, but it is so much like, no, you're wrong. No, you're wrong. That is not true. Why are you saying that? And it's like, how can you be so sure? Because this is such a vast, vast universe, and there are different layers of truth. And ultimately, things keep rolling up to where it's all God, even things that don't look like God. It's all, duality. And, but, we can't know the light without the dark. And so it's not to say that we worship the dark, but it's just to, we can't deny that we have shadow parts to us and so on. But it's just, I have a lot of room for humility in terms of what I don't know, and what I believe. Because again, if we go back to that belief versus experience, I've had some experiences that, nobody can take away from me or talk me out of, but there are like loads of things that I have not experienced that I have to take people's word for. I have to feel into whether that feels right to me or not. And I have to hold things very, very lightly, because something that makes sense to me right now, the number of times my beliefs have evolved, where I'm like, oh, okay, I didn't really kind of think about that side of the facet, and it's like, okay, that now it feels a little bit less right or more right or whatever it is. And it's kind of like that humility, I think, is really important, because things are going to keep unfolding. Like the more we grow and expand, the more opens up, the more we can take in, but our human consciousness is really limited on what it can hold. So I think remembering that for all of us is really important, and especially so that we don't get into that like, I'm right, you're wrong, because then we're just in that separation and we start to get into fear and anger, and it makes it very difficult to hold a higher vibration if we're in that, mindset.
Absolutely. But we also have this beautiful gift of being human. Which is why we have this beautiful ego that can sometimes take over. And I'm right and you're wrong, or you're wrong and I'm right, whichever way you want to slice it. There's a lot of that in the world. But if we can recognize that it's here to teach us, as you very kindly say, the element of humility. And understanding and compassion for another person's journey, to witness it, just like we witness the matrix as you go into a deeper element of meditation, just as you witness the sacred geometry that we live in and breathe through every single moment of our day. We become witnesses of it, but that's the gift of being human.
Beautifully said. Yes. There is such a gift in our humanity and in our human experience. And this is another thing that I see a lot, is that desperation to transcend the human experience. And there is beauty in that. There is beauty in stepping outside of the human experience and getting that experience that we are more, we're not limited in the ways that we think that we are. But it's also our human bodies and our human personalities and our human DNA is a gift. It is a vehicle for us. It's very, very special in the things that we can achieve through this human experience. So it's definitely not to be taken for granted, or to be not cared for.
Right.
Sometimes we go so far in renunciation that it's like, oh my God, this body,
Yes,
you got to just torture this body because it's in my way, and it's
Yes.
like, no, this is a beautiful gift. And there's so much in it, in our DNA, that we have access to much more than what's on the surface.
So precious. So precious. I totally agree.
Yeah.
What do you feel are some of the key attributes that you have learned and garnered and polished and really harnessed to get to where you are?
Oh, that's a really great question. There are things that I've really had to work on, like patience has been a big one, especially in the earlier days of my awakening. I mean, across the board, patience, my whole life has been a hard thing, but it was really starting to become clear that my impatience was something that I needed to work on and overcome. As I was having more awakening, I was so thirsty for more knowledge, more experiences, more. Yes. And there is something to be said in just trusting, that it's trusting in the timing, in the divine timing, and knowing that it will come. And once we do have that trust that we are being cared for, that things are unfolding in the way that they need to, because we can force, there are ways to kind of force things along, to kind of, awaken your Kundalini, for example, quicker than you're actually ready for. And those things can actually really affect your mental health. And so there is a trust that, there is, we need time to breathe and integrate and not have it be like a runaway train. Right. But over time, I think that my meditation practice has helped a lot with the patience as well, just because when you're doing meditation, you are changing the structure of your brain. You're changing the engagement, your default state, from a brain functioning perspective. And you tap into more calmness, and it just starts to become more and more of your baseline, where, your baseline may have been snappier before. You may have been more instinctual. You may have been more driven by your knee-jerk reaction, which is not necessarily the most thoughtful. It's not the highest. It's just what your animalistic kind of lower brain says is the right thing to do right this moment. you know? And so meditation kind of has allowed me to have this pause in my life where I can still be angered. I can still be hurt. but I definitely have more pause, and I have more thought and mindfulness, and just where it's not, I don't jump to the, I don't jump to, let's say, the wrong, that's not the word I want to use, but the conclusion that, where you may think somebody is slighting you, for example, or you may think somebody is being rude to you. I have a lot more of a capability to give somebody the benefit of the doubt, for example. And that bleeds through a lot into the work that I do, and the space that I'm able to hold as I counsel people, or guide meditations and hold space for people. That tends to come through.
Do you believe that is one of potentially of the many callings that we all have? For you, is to hold space and guide others through their path?
Yeah, I get a lot of joy from that. And just being able to kind of the holding space, absolutely. But also just helping people to recognize that there is something beyond the mainstream mass, life. And, I mean, just a couple of days ago, like, I don't drink alcohol, for example. I haven't for many years. And I was at a neighbor's house for the 4th of July, and they were just talking about, like, oh, I need to get a drink. I haven't had a drink yet. And she was like, well, Kara, you can, I think I made some joke about, like, the sparkling lemonade I was drinking or something. And she was like, well, like, I need to have a drink so that I can just, like, calm down. You are that calm. You just are calm. Like, you just are the calm that I'm trying to get through a drink, And so it was a beautiful compliment. But it's kind of, I do feel like part of, because I do have a very mainstream life in a lot of ways. I'm a mom. I, live in a regular suburb in America. I'm married. And I'm not like a monk who's living in the Himalayas. I'm out here just being regular. And, but I'm very happy. And that's not something to be taken for granted, in particular these days, but it's effortless. And it's my default state. And so it's nice to kind of not only be able to hold that space for people, but to sort of open them up to, like, how are we taught to live in society? And are these the ways that are actually driving us to happiness and fulfillment? And if not, what are some other choices that we can be making? And so I think that, I'm very happy to guide people and to give, there are people that I work with that I am guiding more directly and making suggestions. And then I also just am living by example, where it's like, okay, there are a whole host of people that I would never try to intrude upon their belief system. It's not where they are, and that's not what they look to me for. But they can I'm just an example. So it's like, just take what resonates, or, if there's inspiration there of how you may be able to change your thoughts and not be so hard on yourself, or not believe in your limitations, not keep telling yourself the falsehoods that you're telling yourself, and things of that nature, that are just sort of low-hanging fruit.
Yeah. We get so absorbed in all that world so quickly.
Yeah.
Granted, it's a narrative that has been ingrained in us from inception.
Right.
So unlearning all that takes a little bit of time. It's a muscle, it's a practice. And I love the analogy you shared about your neighbor saying, but you're just calm. You're just it.
Right.
But not recognizing that was there was some muscle building that had to happen to get you to that point.
Absolutely. Right. It's been a series of choices. It has been a series of choices. And we are all making choices all the time with everything, and it's, moment by moment. I stopped drinking 4 years ago, for example, because not from like, oh, this is ethically wrong. It was from, I mentioned that I do healing work. And I knew that if I wanted to get sharper and stronger, and more able to maneuver my energy, that, alcohol was just dulling that. And even when you're not drinking, it's just building up, and it's just blurring everything. So that was just sort of like okay, I think I'm ready to let that go. But I then made the choice every day for 4 years up to now, to not drink. It wasn't like, I just had to do that all at once. It was like, no, moment to moment. I've been offered a lot of drinks in 4 years, and I always, continue to make that choice. And the same with meditation. It's like, even though it doesn't feel like a choice anymore, it's so ingrained in my routine, but I do still choose. I could make a different choice. I choose to sit for meditation every day. And in all of those different ways, like once we start being more mindful about wanting to get to a higher version of ourselves, then we have to keep making the choices that support who we want to become.
Yes, absolutely. And that goes along with one small intention at a time.
Yes.
We're not going to eat the elephant in one sitting, but we can chew on it slowly, slowly, slowly. And that's a metaphor. That's not for real, people.
Yeah. Don't go out there and look for elephant meat.
We're in an interesting world. So,
right.
But anyways, it's dissecting and really unraveling this beautiful mind and brain that we have, to do it one piece at a time. That makes it more manageable. It makes it more palatable for us to go, okay, next moment, which is exactly what you're sharing, what you did.
Absolutely. I did have one of those, visuals that I kind of alluded to earlier. That was a really strong message for me, where I could see I could see, not see, but like I knew where little me was, like the human me, but I was experiencing myself like way, way, way far away, like out in space as this huge ball of light.
Right.
And I could connect back to little me, but I was like not little me. I was not just little me. I was also little me, but just like a little fraction of me in that state was little me. And I could see that the way that little me communicated with that huge ball of light was through light. And the way that I gave my light was through choice. It was moment to moment. And every choice that I made changed the quality of my light. And from this big sphere of light the perspective of that, there was no judgment. It was just exactly the amount of the quality of the light that I gave was what it was delivering as my experience, as my lived experience. So if my light was brilliant, I was calling for light. I was calling for light-filled experiences. And if my light was dimmer because I wanted to entertain, there was no like, oh, if I wanted to think about this or watch this movie or have gossip about whatever, it wasn't anything like that. It was just like, I can change my light. If I have dimmer, if my light dims, then I'm just saying that's what I want. I'm just saying, deliver to me this amount of light. So it was this communication, and it was like, I'm calling for this level of light experience. And then the big ball of light was like, yep, okay, got it. And when I joined forces with other lights, and we were consciously directing our light to our big spheres of light, it amplified it greatly, you know, like a Venn diagram or Vesica Pisces, you know, it was like this, you know, amplification of the light. And then all of these big spheres of light were then projecting that back to all of us. So, but what was really beautiful is the fact that there was no judgment. It wasn't like oh no, she's not asking for the level of light today that she asked for yesterday. Oh, you know, it was just like, nope, this is what you get. You just get what you ask for, and it's just neutral. But it goes to show that, and the big takeaway for me from that was that moment to moment choice. Like every choice I make is affecting the quality of light that I'm giving. And so being mindful of that, because it is what we're receiving as well. And it's just a response. It's a call and answer, you know, and so it is. So it was really, really beautiful. And we all have those in that mind frame or that example, it's so easy, you know, because it's like, we get choices all the time. So we get all these chances to make the choice of, you know, am I going to, you know, how are these thoughts affecting me and the light that I'm radiating? Am I looping through thoughts that are darkening me, you know, and recognizing that, and then okay, I'm done with those thoughts. I'm choosing new thoughts. And that can be hard when we're learning how to do it, but it's a muscle, just like you were saying, it's a muscle. We keep recognizing, oh, my thoughts are not of the highest quality that they could be. I'm noticing that. I'm choosing new thoughts, and then tuning in again after a few cycles to be like, am I doing it again? Because often we do. We just get back into these like well-worn grooves of thoughts that we cycle through. But you know, ultimately, we are responsible for our thoughts and our choices. But again, you know, we make choices all day long, so we can just keep choosing higher and higher, and moment to moment.
There's always a choice, which is sometimes feeling like we don't, just because we might not like the choices available. There's still a choice. Doesn't mean you have to like the choices, but you have a choice.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, we always have the choice, and so often we don't feel like we do. We think that we're a victim of our circumstance, and that there is, you know, one way to feel about it, or one way to talk about it, or one way to focus on it. And that, you know, we have to be real with ourselves about if that's serving us or not. Or if a different mode of operation where we start to release those things and start changing what we focus on. And that power is absolutely within us.
Absolutely.
It takes training. I mean, it takes practice.
It does.
And that's
absolutely.
Okay.
And a whole bunch of training too, for sure it does.
Yeah.
But in the same token, there's no judgment, because what we've kind of touched on is where you're at is where you're at. Just be curious that there's more out there than what we see with the naked eye.
Absolutely. Right. Yeah. And releasing that judgment of ourselves and of others is hugely pivotal and key as well. You know, if we want to talk about, again, going back to that light, when we're in judgment, that definitely is dimming our light, and we judge all day long, and we judge so harshly ourselves. You know, that comes, you know, who do we judge the most? For a lot of us, it's the person in the mirror. And so coming out of that and recognizing that and giving grace giving ourselves grace. We're all learning. We're all on this journey. We're all trying. If you're listening to this podcast, you're trying. You wouldn't be listening to this if you were not wanting to improve yourself. And
Absolutely.
so it's recognizing and honoring that. And if you were done, if you'd learned it all already, you wouldn't have a use for this, for this human body, this amazing human body we've been talking about.
That's right.
And the same goes for your neighbor. So
everybody's on their own path, and the more we can honor their journey, the more we can honor our own, because it's often easier for us to honor others first,
right,
than ourselves. So,
right.
Yeah. What a delicious conversation, Kara.
Yeah.
I can't believe we've already, tapped over and in and out of time, but thank you so much for sharing your experience, your wisdom, and the tools that individuals can potentially incorporate in their own lives if they choose to make a change. And if they don't, and they're just in research mode or information gathering mode, that's fine too. But your experience in itself was a beautiful one, and I'm honored and grateful that you shared. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been such a joy and an honor to be here with you. I've really enjoyed this conversation. And if there are people out there who want to learn meditation or want some guidance, I do on my website, karagoodwin.com. I have a free 10-minute guided meditation that is specifically to help you bring in more light. So it is, it's really working on that on a quantum level, bringing in more light into your being. So you can just go and grab that off my website. And it's a great place to start, just to have some guided meditations, especially if you feel like you can't do it.
Absolutely. Yes, please do check that out for sure. Thank you so much again, Kara.
Thank you very much.
I'm Naranjan, and you've been listening to Master of Your Crafts podcast. Please subscribe, rate, and review, and join me next week for another episode. Thank you for listening.